Many years ago, in Surulere, there lived a young woman named Abeke, whose greatest talent in life was noticing things nobody asked her to notice. Abeke had too much observation spirit, and the compound she lived in encouraged the behavior naturally because privacy in that environment was impossible. The compound had one long corridor, 12 rooms, and two bathrooms that caused daily conflicts. The landlord was Babataju, a man who monitored electricity usage there like the federal government. Different categories of struggling Nigerians lived inside that compound. There was a tailor that always shouted at apprentices. One woman was selling akara every morning while insulting inflation. One man who had been starting importation business soon since Buhari's first term, and another tenant who sold wigs online but wore scarf permanently because wig samples were for customers only. Everybody was surviving there somehow. Then, one evening, a new tenant moved in and peace left the compound. His name was Korede. However, the first thing people noticed about him was his perfume because before he even entered the gates, people looked up automatically as if a rich person entered their compound mistakenly. Then, when they saw him properly, they were in shock. Korede looked put together. He was tall, had a fresh haircut, wore clean sneakers, and carried a black laptop bag. Even his wristwatch was clean. Immediately the compound women saw him, they exchanged suspicious looks because they were not used to that kind of freshness. Even the landlord adjusted his singlet properly before greeting him. Ironically, Korede did not even behave proud. He greeted everybody respectfully, smiled politely, and paid his rent complete without begging for next week extension. That alone shocked Babataju. He counted the money twice suspiciously. "You are paying complete?" Korede nodded. "Yes, sir." "No installments?" He shook his head again. "No, sir." Babataju blinked slowly. "Beautiful." Meanwhile, the other tenants were already analyzing him privately. That night, Abeke sat outside with one woman named Mama Bosse when Korede passed carrying a food delivery nylon. Immediately, Mama Bosse whispered, Abeke lowered her voice. "Did you see the shoe?" Mama Bosse nodded slowly. "It is original." They looked toward Korede's room confused because the compound was full of people managing life. But Korede's appearance confused everybody. The boy looked soft like someone with a stable income. They tried to ignore him, but then more suspicious things started to pop up. First, Abeke noticed that Korede slept during the daytime. Every afternoon while the compound was noisy, he would be inside sleeping peacefully. But once night reaches, you'll start seeing movements inside his room from the window. One night, Abeke went outside around 1 a.m. to urinate because there was no water in the toilets, only for her to hear Korede speaking inside his room using a fluent American accent. "Yes, ma'am, I completely understand your frustration." Abeke froze immediately. Her bladder almost forgot what it came to do. Abeke slowly backed away from the window as if she was escaping a ritual site. How could someone have an American accent, make calls at night, wear fresh clothes, and then sleep in the daytime? The next morning, she called an emergency meeting outside near the tap. Mama Bosse arrived first carrying a bucket. Then the barber named Sheyi joined them. Soon, half the compound gathered naturally because Nigerians loved free gatherings. Abeke lowered her voice dramatically. "That new boy is doing Yahoo." Everybody gasped. Sheyi nodded immediately. "I suspected it though." Mama Bosse held her chest. "Abomination." Abeke looked around carefully before continuing. "I heard him speaking to one Oyinbo woman by 1 a.m. Sheyi shook his head. It is confirmed." Another woman added, "Even his phone is shining too much." Then one afternoon, another suspicious thing happened. A delivery bike entered with a big carton which contained expensive-looking gadgets. Abeke nearly fainted. The scamming equipment have landed. She watched through her window while Korede signed for the package, and that only confirmed her suspicion the more. Meanwhile, Korede remained peaceful, completely unaware that the entire compound had turned him into a cybercrime chairman. One evening, while he returned from buying food, he greeted Abeke politely, "Good evening." Abeke answered fearfully, "Good evening." Then she immediately asked, "Hope business is moving." Korede smiled innocently. "It is very stressful, honestly." Abeke nodded slowly like an undercover police officer receiving a confession. That night, she reported everything officially to Baba Taju. The landlord listened seriously while scratching his chest thoughtfully. Abeke lowered her voice. "I am telling you, before EFCC enters this compound." The landlord became nervous immediately because he had just painted his building after 18 years of suffering. A police scandal would wound him deeply. The next morning, Baba Taju started monitoring Korede intentionally. He would walk past Korede's room unnecessarily, and now he knew when Korede received a call. If laptop light reflected from the window, the landlord's blood pressure would jump up immediately. One afternoon, Korede stepped outside wearing dark glasses and answering one serious phone call. Immediately, Baba Taju stood still. Korede paced slowly while speaking calmly. "No, sir, that transaction has already been processed." The landlord froze. "Transaction?" He rushed toward Mama Bosse's room immediately, and 5 minutes later, the compound had already heard a fresh update. Now, according to the compound, international transactions were happening every night. Dollars were entering his account, and clients were complaining for being cheated. One tenant even said, "This boy is advanced in this Yahoo business." Meanwhile, Korede remained unaware. Then another dangerous thing happened. One evening around 11 p.m., power suddenly went off and the entire compound started grumbling before the compound went quiet again. Minutes later, Korede's voice entered the darkness clearly from inside his room. He sounded clearly frustrated. "Sir, calm down please. I understand your anger." Abeke nearly broke her neck trying to grab every word. Korede continued, "I am trying to help you resolve it." Mama Bosse held her chest dramatically. "Maybe he has offended one Oyinbo." Then suddenly, Korede raised his voice slightly. "No sir, I did not steal your money." The compound nearly collapsed spiritually. Everybody froze in their room. No one moved for full 5 seconds. Then, simultaneously, they shouted, "Yahoo!" Doors started opening small around the compound. One man whispered, "What happened?" Abeke lowered her voice dramatically. "It is international fraud arguments." Immediately, everybody started contributing their own theories. One old woman even said, "I knew it from the smell of his perfume." Another tenant added, "Anybody sleeping in the daytime is suspicious. He has blood money appetites." Sheyi the barber shook his head slowly. "Government should investigate this boy, yo." Then, the next day, one child in the compound accidentally made things worse. The boy entered Korede's room one afternoon chasing his football. When he came out, everybody surrounded him immediately asking, "What did you see?" The boy answered innocently, "3 laptops." Mama Bosse sat down immediately. "3?" The child nodded confidently. "One was even showing white people." Now, that was the absolute destruction. Nobody rested again. Everybody started to avoid Korede because they feared he might accidentally initiate them somehow. Meanwhile, Korede himself noticed the atmosphere changing gradually. Children stared at him like a wildlife documentary, and the adults greeted him fearfully now. One woman even started praying quietly anytime he walked past. Korede became confused. One evening, he greeted Sheyi normally. "Boss, how far?" Sheyi answered cautiously, "We thank God." Then he walked away quickly as if he was avoiding something. Korede frowned slightly. Another day, he tried helping Babataju carry his generator inside because of rain, but the landlord nearly shouted from fear, "No, no, no, leave it, leave it." Korede blinked in confusion. "I just wanted to help, sir." The old man laughed awkwardly. "No problem, I can manage." Later that night, Babataju called an emergency landlord meeting with himself. He sat outside alone, scratching his chest. He was afraid and confused at the same time because even though Korede had not offended him personally, he was a time bomb because police could embarrass his compound because of him. It could even get worse with the EFCC seizing some of their property unnecessarily. His tenants could run away and his freshly painted house could become a national embarrassment online. The thought of all this alone wounded him deeply. Meanwhile, Abeke was enjoying the investigation too much now. She had become their intelligence officer. One afternoon, she saw Korede receiving another serious call outside. He was pacing slowly, looking exhausted. Then she heard him say, "Yes, ma'am, your account is active now." Abeke froze immediately. Account? Active? Another target. She rushed off and told Mama Bosse, "This boy is operating internationally." Mama Bosse nearly fainted. "Inside this compound? Hey, God help us." The thing became so serious that some tenants started discussing whether to report Korede anonymously. One old woman even advised, "It is better to take a step before the police comes here and starts beating innocent people." Then, somehow, 3 days later, around 2 p.m., 2 police officers entered the compound asking one direct question: "Who is Korede?" The compound immediately fell under silence. Mama Bosse held her chest dramatically. Abeke's soul stood up with satisfaction and fear together because finally the day has arrived. The 2 officers stood near the gate seriously. One was tall and dark with a strong face, while the other carried a small notebook, looking around the compound carefully. The taller officer repeated, "Who is Korede?" But nobody answered. Oh, supportive Nigerians. Yesterday, they were all investigators, but now, suddenly, nobody knows Korede. Babataju came outside nervously. "Officer, good afternoon." "Good afternoon, sir. We are looking for one Korede." The landlord blinked. "What happened?" The officer looked at him and said, "Just call him." Now, that "just call him" nearly killed the compound. Immediately, all the tenants started peeping from different corners. Abeke whispered dramatically, "I said it oh." Sheyi nodded slowly. Meanwhile, inside his room, Korede was sleeping deeply after working overnight. His headset was still hanging around his neck. Babataju knocked on the door. "Korede, Korede." Inside, Korede woke up confused immediately. "Sir?" The landlord replied, "Police people are here for you." Korede sat up sharply. "Police?" Outside, the compound stopped pretending now. One woman whispered, "He wants to escape." Another one replied, "Block the back," as if they were assisting a Hollywood operation. Meanwhile, Korede simply wore a shirt and slippers, then stepped outside, looking tired and confused. However, the moment the officers saw him, one of them smiled. "Ah, Mr. Korede." The compound froze. "Mr. Not criminal or suspect." The officer stretched his hand respectfully. "I've been trying to get your contact for long." Korede blinked. "Me?" Yes. Someone said you help people apply for remote jobs. My younger brother needs guidance." Korede looked relieved immediately. "Oh, okay." The second officer smiled too. Oh, you are the one that works remotely for one foreign company. Abeke nearly entered the ground. What remotes? The taller officer laughed. These days, remote jobs pay well, oh, una they enjoy. Babataju blinked slowly, while Mama Bosse removed her hand from her chest gradually. Meanwhile, Korede was still confused about why the entire compound looked like a funeral meeting. Then suddenly, the first officer asked, "Can we see your setup later?" Korede nodded, "Sure." The officer shook his hand politely again and then walked away peacefully, leaving the compound behind like an abandoned load. Everyone stood in shock now. Nobody knew what to say. Finally, someone whispered, "So, he's not a suspect?" Nobody answered him. Then slowly, everybody turned toward Abeke, who was already shaking from shame. Mama Bosse cleared her throat awkwardly. Even Babataju looked deeply ashamed now because he too had been planning an emergency eviction privately. Meanwhile, Korede stood there confused. Wait, what exactly did you people think of me? Nobody answered. Then, unfortunately for them, one child replied innocently, "Yahoo boy." Korede blinked slowly and looked around the compound at the guilty faces and awkward body language. Everyone was avoiding eye contact with him now. Suddenly, everything started making sense. The strange greetings, the suspicious stares, and the fear. He laughed bitterly. Wow. Abeke tried recovering. "No, it wasn't like that exactly." But Korede interrupted her. "You thought I was a Yahoo boy?" Nobody denied it because the evidence was plenty. Then, unexpectedly, Korede started laughing ridiculously. "I was wondering why everybody behaved as if I sold human parts." He then went on to explain his situation to them, since nobody there understood remote work. "I once worked as a remote customer support for one American company, and 3 months earlier, I was living in an apartment in Lekki. Unfortunately, the company downsized and I lost the job. I couldn't afford the rent anymore, in addition to taking care of my mother and sister. Instead of forming fake soft life and entering debts, I decided to move into a cheaper compound temporarily while I apply for more remote jobs to stabilize financially. I recently got a small job and the time zone doesn't match our normal work time here. That is why I sleep during the day and work at nights." The compound became quiet properly now because suddenly the compound Yahoo boy looked different. He was just a honest, struggling boy to them now. Then Korede added, "Most times I stand while working so I won't slip off." That one touched Babataju deeply because he suddenly remembered all the nights he heard footsteps moving inside the room. And then that night, lights went off during Korede's shift again. His window was slightly open because of heat. Suddenly, the entire compound heard him clearly. "Sir, please stop shouting at me. I understand your frustration." "No, sir, your package was not stolen. Please calm down." Then one loud American voice screamed through the headset, "This is ridiculous." The compound burst into laughter immediately. Even Abeke bent over laughing now. Mama Bosse held her stomach. "So this is the Oyibo that almost gave us hypertension?" After that day, everything suddenly changed. The tenants started coming to him for remote work advice and everybody started asking about how to arrange their CVs. One man who used to insult Korede before now came and asked, "Can they employ someone with ordinary diploma?" Even Abeke changed completely. She started greeting Korede normally now. One evening, she even apologized. "I am sorry for misunderstanding you." Korede smiled politely. "It's okay." However, the whole situation taught him that as a progressive person, it was risky staying among people who are backward and hell-bent on misunderstanding rather than learning. And so, 3 months later, Korede moved out wisely. Fortunately, he got a better remote job with a better salary and he moved into a better apartment closer to people who understood his lifestyle. The day he was leaving, Babataju sighed emotionally. "You are a good boy, oh." Korede smiled. "Thank you, sir." And all the tenants helped him carry his property out of guilt. Thank you for watching the story. Kindly share your thoughts about the story with me in the comment section. If you enjoyed the story, kindly give the story a thumbs up and share the story out with your loved ones. Subscribe to this channel for more interesting stories. Thank you and remain blessed.